similar reasons. The speculation that Saddam Hussein's tyranny was sustained by the sanctions was strengthened by post-war U.S. government investigations, which revealed that the government was being held together virtually by Scotch tape. Subjective judgments about the matter, however, are of little interest. Unless people are at least given the opportunity to overthrow a tyrannical regime, no outside power has the right to carry out the task, inevitably for its own purposes, and in this case, with horrifying results. Von Sponeck alleged further that the United States was blocking his reports to the Security Council. No such means were needed to safeguard the American population from the opinions of the best-informed Western observers. They were barred from the press by their unwanted conclusions and unusual qualifications. Silence is apparently regarded as insufficient to ensure that the effects of the sanctions will be hidden from view. The government media complex has therefore resorted to the familiar thief technique. When you are caught with your hands in someone's pocket, shout, "Thief, thief!" and point vigorously somewhere else, in the hope that attention will be shifted while you flee. In this case, the device was to initiate intensive inquiry into alleged UN corruption in administering the Oil for Food program, with much bombast about a missing $20 billion that may have been pocketed by the Iraqis. It is important to bear in mind that if it is later conceded that the charges were discredited, they will nevertheless have served their purpose: to eliminate any prospect, however unlikely, that the truly monstrous scandal, the sanctions themselves and their consequences, might escape from oblivion. Though the issue is secondary, the course of the thief technique is nonetheless of some interest. It was quickly shown that though there doubtless was UN corruption, most of the missing $20 billion consisted of illegal U.S.-approved sales of oil to its allies Turkey and Jordan. The bulk of illegal transactions, according to the report of Charles A. Dulfer, the top U.S. inspector in Iraq, consisted of government-to-government agreements between Iraq and other countries, primarily Jordan, the key to Iraq's financial survival, according to the report, and Turkey. All of these transactions took place outside the UN's Oil for Food program, and all were authorized by the UN Security Council, that is, by Washington. The other transactions passed through the U.S.-run Sanctions Committee and hence faced an instant U.S. veto, which was never exercised for illegal kickbacks, though assiduously applied to block humanitarian contracts, U.S. researcher Joy Gordon reports. Any significant smuggling by sea would have been with the tacit cooperation of the U.S. Navy, which virtually constituted the UN Multinational Interception Force, MIF, in the Gulf. In the only serious inquiry into the Oil for Food program, Paul Volcker, chair of a UN-authorized inquiry into possible abuse, came to the preliminary conclusion that questionable kickbacks were close to the $1.7 billion that Charles Dulfer arrived at, a small fraction of the Turkey-Jordan oil sales under the U.S. aegis. The only non-trivial number cited in one of the many excited reports about the major scandal at the United Nations is overcompensation of the Kuwaiti military by $419 million, about 1/4 of Volcker's estimated total of $1.7 billion. The next largest figure reported $200 million of illegal profits, of which $50 million went to Saddam's associates, was uncovered in an inquiry by the international business press, which also found that the largest and boldest smuggling operation in the Oil for Food program was conducted with the knowledge of the U.S. government. Both U.S. and U.K. authorities were notified, but ignored warnings, sometimes conveyed by the MIF. Investigations by the Financial Times found that the Clinton and Bush administrations not only knew, but told the U.S. Congress that Iraq was smuggling oil to Turkey and Jordan, and that they recommended turning a blind eye to it. The reason was that the illegal sales were in the national interest, Since Jordan is an important U.S. client state, and support for Turkey, long a major U.S. base for regional control, promotes security, prosperity, and other vital interests. Whatever the scale of the pre-invasion kickback schemes may have been, it is doubtful that they will even approximate the sums that have disappeared under U.S. management during the occupation of Iraq. As the Coalition Provisional Authority, CPA, ended its rule, the fate of the estimated $20 billion of Iraqi funds that passed into its control, including unspent funds from the Oil for Food program, and more than $11 billion in Iraqi oil revenues, remained a mystery. The lack of transparency is fueling questions about corrupt CPA practices, the Financial Times reported, providing many illustrations, among them studies concluding that 3/4 of contracts worth more than $5 million were handed out without competitive bidding. That included a $1.4 billion project to rebuild Iraq's oil infrastructure, granted to Halliburton, the U.S. oil services company formerly headed by Dick Cheney, the U.S. Vice President, without competitive tender, which made Halliburton the largest single recipient of Iraqi funds. Further inquiries revealed schemes by Texas corporations and legendary oil men to subvert the restrictions imposed by the United Nations Oil for Food program, with some indictments underway. What has appeared suggests a morass of corruption by U.S. businesses, among others. In the most extensive media review of CPA practices, relying primarily on official U.S. audits, Ed Harriman observes that Rumsfeld and Paul Bremer made sure that the reconstruction of Iraq is paid for by the liberated country. Bremer's CPA spent up to $20 billion of Iraqi money, compared to $300 million of U.S. funds. No record could be found for $8.8 billion that passed through the new Iraqi government ministries, under Bremer's control. Payoffs to Texas-based Halliburton and its subsidiaries have been particularly outlandish, but the record of corruption under CPA authority extends far beyond. The schools, hospitals, water supplies, and electricity, all of which were supposed to benefit from CPA-administered money, are in ruins. The inescapable conclusion is that foreign contractors grabbed large bundles of cash for themselves and made sweet deals with their Iraqi contacts. Under Saddam's rule, Harriman observes, both he and the U.S. profited handsomely. In those years, most of Iraq's oil went to California refineries, which grew rich. Today, the system is much the same. The oil goes to California, and the new Iraqi government spends the country's money with impunity. Stuart Bowen, Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction, found that little was left for reconstruction, in part because an estimated $30 billion of Iraqi funds seized by the occupying army, along with funds from Iraqi oil revenues, had been subject to mismanagement and potential fraud by CPA personnel. Much more exciting than the facts about corruption are fevered tales about possible Russian chicanery, or an unexplained $160,000 in the hands of UN official Benon Sivan, or reports that Kofi Annan might or might not have spoken at some gathering to an official of a company that employed his son. Whatever the actual facts, the conclusion is that the UN is in dire need of U.S.-guided reform. Therefore, the Bush administration has focused on the UN-administered Oil for Food program, which became a pool of corruption while allowing Saddam Hussein to divert millions in oil revenues, viewing it as an example of the deep reforms the UN needs, if it is to be effective. Undertaking that task is the next hurdle facing newly appointed UN Ambassador John Bolton. The final report of the Volcker Commission on Corruption at UN headquarters found 2 instances. Warren Hodge reported. Sivan was accused of banking at least $147,000 in kickbacks, and a procurement officer, Alexander V. Yakovlev of Russia was found to have solicited a bribe